G'day and welcome to the TheJadeRat. Thank you so much for tuning in. It's Jaya here, and today we're going to be doing something that I guess a lot of people around the world at this time of year are doing, and we're about a week into Inktober, and I'm having a great time with it. And you'll see the first week of drawings and paintings as we go through. Last year I didn't complete an Inktober. I ended up being busier than expected, so I decided to forego that year. But I'm really excited to be back, and I'm having a great time with it. As I have done in the past, last time I did it with one piece, but this year I have decided to stick to a mini theme within the challenge itself, which is Tolkien. So recently I've been rereading actually, The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings with one of my best friends, and we've really enjoyed going through that story again. So I thought, why not use this time in Inktober to not only brush up on my inking and drawing skills, but also stick to that theme. So we've got aspects of Tolkien's legendarium coming in to the challenge this year. And first up we've got crystal, and of course it immediately defaulted to the crystal that Gandalf has in his staff that he typically uses to light the way. Of course, as a servant of the secret fire, he has light, and he is a leader and he guides, and there is a crystal there. In the books, I'm not sure if it's quite clear whether it's really a crystal or not, but there is definitely a glow emanating from the top of his staff. And of course in the movies it's shown as a crystal. I had a lot of fun doing this one. Of course, at the first of the series you always get a little bit excited. There's an energy running through. But particularly with the sort of gnarled roots of the staff and that sort of parallel-ish lines that run along the grain of the wood, and those grooves and knots that are sort of shown in a darker areas that create a really interesting texture, and I had a lot of fun with it. With the crystal itself, did a very light wash of the ink, super diluted, and then did some highlights and accent coloration, I guess, with a white ink that was originally white and is now more of a creamy beige color, off-white, because I kind of left it sitting for too long. But there we go. For day 2, I actually forgot to record this one. Ended up being super busy that day recording for some dance performances, but here it is. Sauron, fully formed Sauron. You can see he's got the ring there, and he's got his suit of armor. Day 2's prompt was suit, and with red ink to sort of make it a bit spicy. And of course next we've got Eärendil, who was a mariner, as we all know. The day 3 prompt was vessel, and of course I had to think of one of the few sort of known stories about vessels. There's a few in the Silmarillion, of course, but in Lord of the Rings it only really features in a couple of places. It's very an on-land story, but of course we've got Eärendil, who was a mariner, that took the Silmaril across the ocean to the west, to Valinor, and sort of brought back some of the light that was lost so many years ago. And you can see him holding the jewel at the front near the bow, of the boat, and it's glowing. And to achieve that effect, and some of the stars, I actually used masking fluid to keep the areas as white as possible, so that they don't get stained by the ink. And of course there's his symbol, which is on the mainsail. I always imagine that and a lot of the images of Erendil show him having a squarish mainsail. I'm not entirely sure what type of ship he would have used, but I did try to get some of that sort of sailing, maritime painting styles involved. Swirling water there underneath, because of course the sea is supposed to be unreachable, well, the island, because the sea prevents them from coming across. So I've been using some blue ink to accent the ocean, the encircling sea, I believe that's what it's called. I could be wrong. But of course, after Arda was changed to be round, and then the ocean, well, Valinor was no longer accessible by land, and I sort of used the blue here to accent both his emblem and the ocean. The figurehead of the boat is in the shape of a swan, because of course Elwing, I say of course, but in the Lord of the Rings, it's not as clear what the exact story is. It's more told in prose or in poetry form, so it's just, you have to extrapolate the information. But yeah, Elwing, which is Elrond's mum, comes in, and yeah, that is Erendil, for propped vessel, riding his boat on the way to Valinor to leave his 2 kids behind and later come back as a star to help Frodo. Next up is Not. So day 4, I believe it was Not. And this one was actually quite hard to find an idea for, because it's not something like Crystal, where in a sort of fantasy setting that's quite common. You did have to think about the places where a knot would have been used, and also have it be interesting. So here we've got Gollum being bound by the elvish rope. Clearly he is struggling. I believe it both burns and freezes him. And the inspiration for the knot itself was an anchor knot, I believe, that takes 2 ends of the rope as input, and then ties them. But I did add in a few extra rounds of the knot to go beyond that. And his pose, I used my brother as a reference. I asked him to sort of kneel like that, and then I took a photo and got him to pose, and had it to be a little bit more pitiful, looking up and in sort of agony. Next we've got Roak, flying off in the distance, and then Kark up here at the front, which are the 2 crows, the old crow Kark and his son Roak, that live on Ravenhill near the Lonely Mountain. And as Thorin and company go to the mountain, they get a lot of information, and information is passed to Lake Town using the crows and their network of information that they have with the birds and nature around them. So here he is sitting sort of atop Raven Hill, and you can see a stylized Lonely Mountain at the background, very faintly. I had a lot of fun drawing in his feathers actually, because ravens and crows, but more ravens, have a sort of very fine feathery down almost near their face, and when they caw it's quite it fans out in a really interesting way, and of course drawing their little feet, which is fun. We have a local crow, and he's only got one eye, and he comes to visit us in our backyard, and yeah, he was one of the inspirations for this piece, and to get the feathers and posture. Next we've got Spirit. This is day 6, because day 5 was Raven. Day 6 is Spirit, and I think out of all of them this is probably my favourite to draw, and it's also got a sort of twofold meaning to it. It features the elf Koh-I-Noor of the Noldor on the right, and on the left there the figure is Namo, also known as Mandos, who is the Valar, so the sort of demigod, high angel, related to spirits. And of course when elves die, their spirit goes to Mandos, the halls of Mandos, and he's sort of like the Hades, king of the underworld type person, who's also a judge. Like, he will judge you based on your deeds and whether you sort of deserve to be reincarnated if you're an elf. And in this particular scene, so Koh-I-Noor means spirit of fire. Like, he's very charismatic and fiery, and he has an argument after the 2 trees get destroyed. He has an argument with the Valar regarding the Silmarils, and this is a scene where Mandos is saying he's saying that you're not the first to die. This is of course because at this point in time his father Finwë would have been stabbed, I think, stabbed by Morgoth, and he is of course aware, because he's the Valar of the dead and the spirits, so he knows that his body, Finwë's body, has separated. So you can tell, he's like, okay, this is the first person to die in Valinor, like properly. Of course he wasn't the first ever, but first properly. Next we've got, and final for this week, number 7 is Fan. Fan was probably the hardest one to find a meaning for, because it doesn't have any sort of obvious references, but I decided to go for Elendil, and particularly his fanned wing feather helmet thing, and I thought this one was going to turn out kind of gross, but it ended up turning out really well. I really like doing the scalloped sort of texture on like the helmet at the top and both at the side of the face, how the feathers on a bird would like layer down. Similarly, the scallop pattern sort of goes down, and then adding a tiny bit of like highlight onto the helmet there. But of course you'll notice that he's lying down on the ground. It's drawn at an angle where he has fallen on the battlefield, and he's lying on the floor of the battleground near Mordor, where he and his good friend Gil-galad unfortunately pass away, and we are left with Sauron's hand cut off. But yeah, that concludes first week. Yeah, thank you for watching, and I will see you next week.